The air in the crowded cafe turned cold the moment he raised his voice. Laughter echoed, cruel, sharp, deliberate. She stood frozen, humiliated, as her ex mocked her broken life in front of strangers. But across the street, a man in a tailored black suit paused. His jacket hung open, revealing dark tattoos that coiled like shadows across his chest. He didn't move. He simply watched. And when his eyes found hers, something shifted. Power, fate, danger. Her world was about to change forever. Thank you for joining this story. Please like, share, and subscribe. Daniela Russo had learned to make herself invisible. It was a skill she'd perfected over the past 6 months, ever since her life had unraveled like cheap thread. She kept her head down, her voice quiet, her presence small. She'd mastered the art of blending into crowds, of disappearing into the background of her own existence. But today invisibility failed her. The cafe was packed with the usual afternoon crowd. Business people grabbing espresso, students hunched over laptops, tourists snapping photos of their overpriced lattes. Daniela sat in the corner, nursing a coffee she could barely afford, trying to work up the courage to walk into yet another job interview. Then Marco walked in. Her ex-boyfriend. The man who'd promised her forever, then left her with nothing but debt and humiliation when his business ventures collapsed. He'd blamed her for everything, for not being supportive enough, for not believing in him enough, for not being enough. Daniela's hands tightened around her cup. She prayed he wouldn't see her. He saw her. Well. Marco's voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. Look who's slumming it at Cafe Mediocre. Heads turned. Daniela felt her cheeks burn. Marco, she said quietly. Please don't. Don't what? He moved closer, his designer suit, purchased with money he'd borrowed and never repaid, catching the light. Don't acknowledge my pathetic ex-girlfriend who's still pretending she has a future? A woman at the next table whispered to her companion. Someone laughed. Daniela's throat tightened. I'm not doing this with you. Of course you're not. You never do anything. Marco leaned against her table, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Still pretending you're worth something? Last I heard you couldn't even hold down a job at a discount store. That's embarrassing even for you. Her fingers trembled. She wanted to stand up, to walk out with her dignity intact. But her legs wouldn't move. You know what your problem is? Marco continued, warming to his audience. Some people were openly staring now, their expressions ranging from pity to amusement. You're weak. Always have been. I wasted 3 years trying to make something out of nothing. Trying to turn you into someone worth keeping. Daniela's vision blurred. Don't cry. Don't you dare cry. Look at you now. Marco's voice dripped with contempt. Living in that shoebox apartment, wearing clothes that went out of style 5 years ago, drinking the cheapest coffee on the menu because you probably counted change to afford it. You think anyone's going to want you now? You're damaged goods, sweetheart. Used up. Worthless. The words landed like physical blows. Each one found a target. Every insecurity, every fear, every moment of self-doubt she'd experienced over the past 6 months. I actually feel sorry for you, Marco said, straightening his tie. No job. No prospects. No future. You're going to end up alone in that sad little apartment, wondering where everything went wrong. And you know what? You'll have no one to blame but leave. The single word cut through Marco's tirade like a knife through silk. The entire cafe fell silent. Daniela looked up, her vision still blurred with unshed tears. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair and a presence that seemed to pull all the oxygen from the room. His black suit was perfectly tailored, the kind that cost more than most people made in a month. The jacket hung open, and beneath it, Daniela could see the collar of a black shirt and something else. Tattoos. Dark, intricate ink traced along his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. More tattoos marked his left hand where it rested at his side. Elegant patterns that suggested both artistry and danger. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. They were fixed on Marco with an intensity that was almost physical, cold, empty, and lethal. Marco turned, his smirk already forming. "Excuse me." The man didn't repeat himself. He simply walked forward, his movements fluid and controlled. Each step was deliberate, measured like a predator closing in on prey. The cafe remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. When the man reached Daniela's table, he stopped. Up close, she could see more details. The sharp line of his jaw, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his tattoos extended down his forearm in patterns that looked like smoke and shadows. He looked at Marco. Just looked at him. Marco's confidence began to crumble. Look, this is none of your business. I was just talking to... You're done talking." The man's voice was quiet, controlled, but there was something underneath it. Something dark and absolute. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Marco's face paled. "Who the hell do you think you are?" The man tilted his head slightly and Daniela saw something flicker in his eyes. Something that made her pulse quicken with a fear that had nothing to do with being in danger herself. "I think," the man said softly, "that you should leave before I lose my patience." Marco opened his mouth, closed it, looked around the cafe as if hoping for support. No one met his eyes. "This is ridiculous," Marco muttered, but he was already backing away. "She's not worth this. She's not worth anything." The man's expression didn't change, but his left hand flexed, just once. The movement revealed more tattoos on his knuckles and something else. Something that made Marco's eyes widen. A ring. Heavy, gold, with a symbol Daniela didn't recognize. Marco nearly tripped over a chair in his haste to leave. The door slammed shut behind him. The cafe remained frozen for another heartbeat. Then slowly conversations resumed. People returned to their phones, their laptops, their lives. But Daniela noticed they were all being very careful not to look at the man who still stood beside her table. He turned to her. His eyes, dark brown, almost black, swept over her face. His expression remained unreadable, but something in his gaze softened. Just barely. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was different now. Still quiet, still controlled, but without the edge that had made Marco flee. Daniela realized she was shaking. "I'm fine." It was a lie. They both knew it. The man studied her for a moment longer, and Daniela had the unsettling sensation that he could see right through her. That he knew exactly how not fine she was. "Good," he said finally. He reached into his jacket. Daniela tensed and pulled out a card. He placed it on the table in front of her. "If he bothers you again," the man said, "call this number." Daniela looked down at the card. It was simple, expensive looking. Just a phone number embossed in black on heavy cream cardstock. No name. No title. When she looked up, ready to thank him or ask who he was or demand to know why he'd intervened, he was gone. Daniela sat there, trembling, her coffee long cold, staring at the card. Around her, the cafe had returned to normal. As if nothing had happened. As if a complete stranger hadn't just dismantled her ex-boyfriend with a few quiet words and a look that promised violence. She picked up the card with shaking fingers and slipped it into her pocket. She told herself she'd throw it away later. He didn't. 3 days later, Daniela got the job. It wasn't much. Part-time sales associate at a small boutique that sold overpriced scarves and jewelry to tourists. But it was something. It was hers. And for the first time in months she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could claw her way back to something resembling a life. The boutique was in a nice part of the city, the kind of neighborhood where the streets were clean and the shops had real flowers in the window boxes. Daniela's apartment was a 40-minute walk away, but she didn't mind. Walking was free and the exercise helped clear her head. On her 3rd day she stayed late to help reorganize the inventory. By the time she finished, the sun had set and the street was quiet. She was locking the boutique's door when she felt it. That sensation of being watched. Daniela's pulse quickened. She turned slowly, scanning the street. At first she saw nothing. Just parked cars and empty sidewalks and the warm glow of streetlights. Then she saw him. He stood across the street, leaning against a sleek black car that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. His jacket was open again, revealing more of those dark tattoos that marked his skin like a warning. His hands were in his pockets, his posture relaxed. But his eyes were fixed on her. Daniela's breath caught. It was him. The man from the cafe. They stared at each other across the empty street. Daniela's heart hammered against her ribs. She should be scared, shouldn't she? A strange man following her, watching her, showing up outside her new job. But fear wasn't what she felt. It was something else. Something more complicated. The man didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't cross the street or approach her. He just watched. Daniela swallowed hard. She wanted to say something, to demand to know who he was and why he was there. But the words stuck in her throat. Finally, she turned and walked away. She made it 3 blocks before she dared to look back. He was gone. But somehow she knew he was still there. Still watching. Still protecting her from threats she couldn't see. That night, Daniela's apartment was small and shabby, with walls so thin she could hear her neighbors' conversations and plumbing that groaned like a dying animal. But it was affordable, and after everything that had happened with Marco, affordable was all that mattered. She made herself tea, the cheap kind, the only kind she could afford, and sat on her second-hand couch, staring at nothing. The card was on her coffee table. She'd taken it out of her pocket when she'd gotten home, intending to throw it away. But she couldn't make herself do it. Daniela picked it up, running her thumb over the embossed numbers. Who was he? Why had he helped her? And why was he still watching? She thought about his eyes, dark and intense but not cruel. About the way he'd looked at her in the cafe, like she was something precious that needed protecting. About the way Marco had fled at just a look from this stranger. Daniela's hand trembled. She put the card back down. She told herself she was being ridiculous. He was probably just some wealthy businessman who'd happened to be passing by. Maybe he had a daughter. Maybe he'd seen someone helpless and decided to play hero for a day. It didn't mean anything. It couldn't mean anything. But when she finally fell asleep that night, it was his eyes she saw in her dreams. 4 days later, the boutique had a steady stream of customers. Mostly wealthy women looking for the perfect accessory or tourists wanting something authentically Italian to take home. Daniela was getting better at reading them, at knowing which scarf to suggest or which piece of jewelry would complete their outfit. She was helping an older woman decide between 2 nearly identical bracelets when the door chimed. "I'll be with you in just a moment," Daniela called out, not looking up. "Take your time." The voice made her freeze. Controlled. Familiar. Daniela turned slowly. He stood in the doorway, his presence somehow making the boutique feel smaller. In the bright afternoon light, she could see him more clearly. The sharp lines of his face, the way his dark hair was perfectly styled, the expensive watch on his wrist. In the case, they were more visible now. Elegant patterns that wrapped around his neck and disappeared beneath his collar. More ink on his left forearm where his sleeve was rolled up to reveal strong, scarred hands. He looked dangerous, like violence wrapped in expensive fabric. But his eyes, when they met hers, were almost gentle. "Buonasera," he said softly. Daniela's mouth went dry. Can I help you?" The older woman she'd been helping glanced between them, her eyes widening slightly. She quickly grabbed one of the bracelets. "I'll take this one. Just ring me up, dear." Her hands shook as she processed the sale. The older woman left quickly, casting one more nervous glance at the man before hurrying out. Suddenly, Daniela was alone with him. He moved deeper into the boutique, his gaze sweeping the displays before returning to her. "This is a nice shop. Thank you." Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "Are you looking for something specific?" "A gift. For..." His eyes held hers. "Someone important." Daniela's pulse quickened. She forced herself to stay professional, to treat him like any other customer. "What kind of gift?" "Something elegant." He moved closer and she caught his scent, Expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Timeless. Something that would suit a beautiful woman. The way he said beautiful made her skin flush. We have several options, she managed. Price range. Not a concern. Of course not. Daniela led him to a display of silk scarves, acutely aware of him behind her. His presence was almost physical, like heat against her back. These are handmade in Milan, she said, touching one of the scarves. The silk is. What would you choose? The question caught her off guard. Me. Yes. He was close now, close enough that she could see the details of his tattoos. They weren't crude or aggressive, they were art. Symbols and patterns that suggested wealth, power, legacy. If someone wanted to give you a gift, something that would make you feel valued, what would you want? Daniela's breath hitched. No one had asked her a question like that in. She couldn't remember how long. She reached for a scarf almost without thinking. Deep burgundy silk with delicate gold threading that caught the light. It was one of the most expensive pieces in the shop, but it was also the most beautiful. This one, she said softly. He took it from her and his fingers brushed hers. The contact lasted less than a second, but it sent electricity racing up her arm. Daniela pulled back quickly, her cheeks burning. The man studied the scarf, then looked at her. Perfect. He wasn't looking at the scarf. I'll wrap it for you, Daniela said, needing something to do with her hands. No need. He placed several bills on the counter. Far more than the scarf cost. Your change, Daniela started. Keep it. He was already walking toward the door. Wait, she called out. I don't even know your name. He paused in the doorway, glancing back. For a moment she thought he might tell her. Then he simply said, You'll be safe now. And he was gone. Daniela stood there, staring at the money on the counter, her heart racing. The scarf was gone. He'd taken it with him. And somehow she knew exactly who he'd bought it for. 2 days later, Daniela found the scarf on her doorstep. It was wrapped in delicate tissue paper, placed carefully in front of her apartment door. No note. No card. Just the burgundy silk with its gold threading, more beautiful than she'd remembered. Her hands shook as she picked it up. He knew where she lived. He should be terrified. Should be calling the police or changing her locks or moving to a different apartment. Instead, she brought the scarf inside and held it against her cheek, the silk soft and cool against her skin. It smelled like his cologne. Daniela closed her eyes, her heart aching with something she didn't want to name. 3 days later, she wore the scarf to work. She told herself it didn't mean anything. It was just a beautiful piece of clothing and she'd be stupid to waste it. But when she caught her reflection in the boutique's mirror, the burgundy silk bringing out the warmth in her skin, the gold threading catching the light, she felt beautiful for the first time in months. That evening she was closing up when she noticed the car again. But, expensive. It was parked across the street and he was leaning against it, watching her. This time, Daniela didn't pretend she hadn't seen him. She locked the boutique door and walked across the street. Her heart hammered with each step. This was crazy. This was dangerous. She was walking toward a man who was clearly following her, who knew where she lived, who made grown men flee with a single look. But she couldn't stop herself. When she reached him, she stopped a few feet away. Up close, she could see more details. The way his tattoos extended up his neck in intricate patterns, the faint scars on his knuckles, the way his dark eyes tracked every movement she made. Are you following me? She asked. Yes. The blunt honesty surprised her. Why? He was quiet for a moment, his gaze intense. To make sure you're safe. Safe from what? People who might hurt you. Daniela wrapped her arms around herself. The scarf, his scarf, felt like a brand against her throat. I don't need a bodyguard. I disagree. You don't even know me. His jaw tightened. I know enough. Like what? He stepped closer and Daniela's breath caught. He moved like a predator. Smooth, controlled, dangerous. But when he spoke, his voice was almost gentle. I know your ex-boyfriend is a coward who tried to destroy what he couldn't control. I know you work 2 jobs and still can't afford decent coffee. I know you walk home alone at night through neighborhoods that aren't safe. I know you deserve better than what life has given you. Daniela's eyes stung. How do you know all that? Because I pay attention. That's called stalking. I call it protection. I didn't ask for your protection. No, he agreed. But you need it anyway. Daniela's hands clenched into fists. I don't even know your name. He was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, Alessandro. Alessandro De Luca. The name hit her like cold water. De Luca. She'd heard that name before. Whispered in back rooms and dark corners. Associated with power, money, influence. And violence. Her voice came out as a whisper. You're Mafia. Alessandro didn't deny it. He simply held her gaze, unflinching. Daniela took a step back. You need to stay away from me. I can't. Why not? His eyes darkened. Because the moment I saw you in that cafe, everything changed. What does that mean? He stepped closer, closing the distance she'd created. It means I can't stop thinking about you. It means I see you when I close my eyes. It means the idea of someone hurting you makes me want to burn the world down. Daniela's breath caught. You don't know me. Then let me. The words hung between them, heavy with promise and danger. Alessandro. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process what he was offering or what it would cost. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said quietly. Not yet. I'm just asking you to let me keep you safe. And if I say no? His jaw tightened. Then I'll respect your decision. But I'll still be here. Watching. Making sure no one hurts you. That's not normal. No, he agreed. Nothing about this is normal. Daniela stared at him, at this beautiful, dangerous man who'd inserted himself into her life without permission. She should tell him to leave. Should threaten to call the police. Should run as far and as fast as she could. Instead, she heard herself say, okay. Alessandro's eyes flared with something fierce and possessive. Okay. You can. She took a shaky breath. You can walk me home. Just tonight. It was a small concession. A tiny crack in her armor. But the way Alessandro looked at her, like she'd just given him the world, made her realize it was so much more than that. Get in, he said, gesturing to the car. I'll drive you. It's only a few blocks. It's dark. And you're tired. His voice left no room for argument. Get in, Daniela. The sound of her name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. He got in the car. The interior was all leather and luxury, the kind of vehicle she'd only ever seen in movies. Alessandro slid into the driver's seat and suddenly the space felt smaller, more intimate. He pulled away from the curb smoothly, his movements controlled and confident. How did you know where I work? Daniela asked. I asked. Asked who? He glanced at her, a slight smile playing at his lips. People who know better than to refuse me. It should have scared her. But somehow it didn't. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Alessandro spoke again. The scarf, he said. You're wearing it. Daniela's hand went to her throat, touching the silk. It's beautiful. Thank you. It suits you. Why did you buy it for me? Alessandro was quiet for a moment. Because I wanted to give you something beautiful. Something that would remind you that you deserve beautiful things. Tears pricked at Daniela's eyes. When was the last time someone had given her something just to make her happy? When was the last time someone had seen her as anything other than a burden or a disappointment? I don't understand you, she whispered. I know. Alessandro's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't fully understand it myself. Then why? Because some things don't need understanding, Daniela. Some things just are. He pulled up in front of her building. A shabby structure that looked even worse next to his expensive car. Alessandro turned to her, his eyes intense. Can I walk you to your door? It was such a simple request. Such a normal thing. But nothing about this felt normal. Yes, she said. They walked up the 3 flights of stairs in silence. Daniela was acutely aware of him behind her. His presence, his scent, the way he seemed to take up all the space in the narrow hallway. At her door she turned to face him. "Thank you," she said. "For the ride. And the scarf. And everything." Alessandro stepped closer. Not crowding her, but close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. "Daniela," he said softly. "I need you to understand something." "What?" His hand came up, hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever you need, whatever happens, I'm here." "Why?" The question came out as a plea. "Why me?" Alessandro's eyes burned into hers. "Because you're you. Because in a world full of pretenders and liars and people who take what they want and destroy what they can't have, you're real. You're genuine. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for." Daniela's breath caught. "Alessandro. You don't have to say anything," he continued. "You don't have to feel the same way. But I need you to know that this," he gestured between them, "this isn't going away. I'm not going away." Her heart pounded. "What if I want you to?" His jaw tightened. "Then I'll give you space. But I won't stop protecting you. I won't stop making sure you're safe." "That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "But it's the truth." They stood there in the dim hallway, the air thick with unspoken words and impossible possibilities. Finally Daniela said, "I should go inside." Alessandro nodded slowly. He stepped back, giving her space. But before she could unlock her door, he spoke again. "Daniela." She turned. "Sleep well," he said softly. "Dream sweet dreams. And know that nothing will hurt you while I'm breathing." The promise in his words made her shiver. She went inside, closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. Through the thin wood she heard his footsteps retreating down the hallway. Daniela slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. What was she doing? This was insane. He was dangerous. He was Mafia, for God's sake. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the way he'd looked at her. Like she was precious, like she mattered, like she was worth protecting. Like she was worth everything. And for the first time in months, Daniela let herself wonder. If 1 week later, Alessandro kept his word. He didn't crowd her. Didn't push. Didn't demand anything she wasn't ready to give. But he was always there. She'd catch glimpses of his car when she walked to work. Find small gifts on her doorstep. Flowers, coffee from the expensive place down the street. Once a book she'd mentioned wanting to read months ago and had no idea how he'd known about. He never asked for thanks. Never demanded her time or attention. He just cared for her. Quietly. Consistently. It was terrifying. It was also the most romantic thing that had ever happened to her. Daniela tried to resist. Tried to maintain distance. Tried to convince herself this couldn't possibly be real or healthy or anything but a disaster waiting to happen. But every time she saw him, every time she found another small gift or caught him watching her with those intense dark eyes, her resistance crumbled a little more. 10 days later, Daniela was arranging a new display in the boutique when the door chimed. She looked up expecting a customer. Instead, she found a man in his late 20s with an easy smile and expensive clothes. He was handsome in a conventional way, nothing like Alessandro's dangerous beauty, but pleasant enough. "Hi there," he said, his smile widening. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for a gift for my sister." "Of course." Daniela put on her professional smile. "What did you have in mind?" "Something elegant but not too flashy. She's turning 30, so it needs to be special." Daniela led him to a display of leather goods. "These are all handmade in Florence. Very high quality." The man, he introduced himself as Luca, examined the items with genuine interest. He was friendly, charming, asking questions about her recommendations. Too friendly. "You have excellent taste," Luca said, his smile turning flirtatious. My sister's lucky I found you. Daniela's smile became strained. Thank you. Do you do personal shopping? I'd love your input on some other gifts I need to buy. I'm sorry, but I'd make it worth your while. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Maybe over dinner? I could show you some of the city's best restaurants. Daniela's stomach tightened. I appreciate the offer, but come on. Luca's smile was still in place, but there was an edge to it now. One dinner. What's the harm? The harm, a cold voice said from the doorway, is that she's not interested. Daniela's heart stopped. Alessandro stood in the entrance, his presence filling the boutique like a storm. His expression was calm, almost pleasant. But his eyes were lethal. Luca turned, his smile faltering. I'm sorry, who are? He stopped mid-sentence. Because Alessandro had moved closer and now Luca could see the tattoos on his neck, the scars on his hands, the ring on his finger. Luca's face went pale. Mr. De Luca. I didn't realize. Leave, Alessandro said softly. It wasn't a request. Luca practically ran from the boutique, leaving his intended purchase on the counter. The door swung shut. Silence filled the space. Daniela's hands were shaking. He should be grateful. Should thank Alessandro for intervening. Instead, she felt something else rising in her chest. Bigger. You can't keep doing that, she said. Alessandro turned to her, his expression unreadable. Doing what? Scaring away every man who talks to me. He wasn't just talking to you. He was making you uncomfortable. I can handle myself. I know you can. Alessandro's voice remained calm. But you shouldn't have to. That's not your decision to make. Isn't it? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Daniela's chest heaved. What gives you the right? Alessandro stepped closer, his eyes intense. The fact that I care about you. The fact that watching some idiot make you uncomfortable makes me want to do things that would get me arrested. The fact that you deserve better than men who don't understand the meaning of no. You don't own me. No, he agreed. I don't. He moved closer still until he was standing directly in front of her. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. But I want to, he said quietly. I want to be the one who protects you. The one who makes sure no one ever hurts you again. The one who gives you everything you deserve and more. Daniela's breath caught. Alessandro. Tell me you don't feel it, he said, his voice rough. Tell me you don't think about me. Tell me you don't wonder what this could be. She couldn't. Because she did feel it. Did think about him. Did wonder. This is crazy, she whispered. Yes. You're dangerous. Yes. I should be running away from you. Probably. Then why can't I? Alessandro's hand came up, cupping her cheek. His touch was gentle despite the violence she knew he was capable of. Because some things are inevitable, he said softly. Some things are meant to be. And from the moment I saw you, I knew you were meant to be mine. Daniela's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. I know. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But I promise you, Daniela, I will never hurt you. I will never abandon you. I will never make you feel less than the incredible woman you are. How can you promise that? Because I've never wanted anything the way I want you. Because you've become essential to me. Because the thought of losing you is more terrifying than anything I've ever faced. The confession broke something inside her. Daniela reached up, covering his hand with hers. What if this doesn't work? What if we're too different? What if? Then we'll figure it out together. Together, she repeated softly. Alessandro leaned down, his forehead touching hers. Together. If you'll have me. Daniela closed her eyes, breathing in his scent, feeling his warmth. This was insane. Reckless. Possibly the worst decision she'd ever make. Okay, she whispered. Alessandro pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. Okay. I want to try. I want to see what this could be. The smile that spread across his face transformed him. It was beautiful and genuine and full of something that looked like joy. "You won't regret it," he promised. Then he kissed her. It was soft at first, gentle, almost reverent, like he was afraid she might break. But when Daniela's hands slid up to grip his jacket, pulling him closer, the kiss deepened. Alessandro's arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. His other hand tangled in her hair. The kiss turned consuming, desperate, full of weeks of restrained desire. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Alessandro rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he said. Daniela's heart raced. "Alessandro. Not for that. Not yet." His voice was rough. "I just want you close. Want to make sure you're safe. Want to take care of you the way you deserve." He should say no. Should maintain boundaries. Should slow this down. "Okay," she heard herself say. Alessandro's eyes flared with possessive satisfaction. He took her hand, the simple gesture somehow more intimate than the kiss, and led her outside. The boutique could wait. Everything could wait. Because for the first time in her life, Daniela was choosing something for herself. She was choosing him. Alessandro's home wasn't what Daniela expected. She'd imagined something cold and imposing, all marble and intimidation, a fortress designed to keep the world at bay. Instead she found warmth. The penthouse was elegant, yes. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime, art on the walls that belonged in museums. But there were also personal touches. Books stacked on side tables. A worn leather chair by the window. Photographs in simple frames. Evidence of a life, not just a showcase. "This is beautiful," Daniela said softly. Alessandro closed the door behind them, his hand still holding hers. "It's home." He led her through the space, pointing out small details. The view of the cathedral at sunset, the kitchen where he actually cooked despite having a chef on call, the library where he spent most of his evenings. "You read," Daniela said, surprised as she examined the shelves. "Philosophy, history, literature, all well-worn. Does that surprise you?" "I don't know what I expected." She turned to face him. "But yes." Alessandro moved closer, his eyes intense. "I'm not just what people say I am, Daniela. I'm not just the violence and the power. There's more. I'm starting to see that." His hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Are you hungry?" "Starving, actually." Alessandro smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Let me make you something." "You cook." "My nana would rise from her grave if I didn't." Daniela laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd laughed? Really laughed? In the kitchen, Alessandro moved with the same controlled grace he brought to everything else. He pulled out ingredients, his hands confident as he chopped vegetables and heated olive oil. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a stool at the counter. "Tell me about yourself. What do you want to know?" "Everything." He glanced at her, his eyes warm. "What makes you happy? What keeps you awake at night? Your dreams. Your fears. All of it." So Daniela talked. She told him about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs. About dreaming of becoming an artist but settling for practical degrees and practical jobs. About Marco and the wreckage he'd left behind. About the months of struggling, of feeling invisible, of wondering if she'd ever matter to anyone again. Alessandro listened without interrupting, his hands moving steadily as he prepared their meal. But she could see the tension in his jaw when she talked about Marco, the way his knuckles went white when she mentioned feeling worthless. "You matter," he said finally, his voice rough. "To me, you matter more than anything." Daniela's throat tightened. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He plated the pasta. Simple, perfect, smelling of garlic and herbs. "I know you're stronger than you think. I know you've survived things that would have broken most people. I know you see beauty in small things. I know you deserve so much more than life has given you." He set the plate in front of her, then poured wine into crystal glasses. And I know, he continued, his eyes holding hers, that I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you're worth everything. Daniela's hand trembled as she picked up her fork. Alessandro, I eat, he said gently. We have time. The pasta was perfect. They ate in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing glances that said more than words could. After dinner, Alessandro led her to the living room. The city spread out below them, lights twinkling like stars. Stay tonight, he said. Sleep in the guest room. No pressure. No expectations. I just want you safe. Want you here. Daniela should say no. Should maintain boundaries. Should protect herself. Okay, she whispered. Later that night. The guest room was luxurious. A king-sized bed with sheets that felt like silk. A bathroom with heated floors, windows that overlooked the city. Daniela stood by the window, wearing one of Alessandro's shirts that he'd given her. It hung to her thighs, smelling like him. He should be exhausted. Should fall into bed and sleep for hours. Instead she was restless. A soft knock on the door made her turn. Come in. Alessandro entered, now wearing just dark pajama pants, his chest bare. Daniela's breath caught. She'd seen glimpses of his tattoos before, but now she could see them fully. They covered his left shoulder and chest, intricate patterns of smoke and shadows, symbols she didn't recognize, designs that spoke of legacy and power. More ink traced down his arm, wrapping around his bicep and forearm in elegant swirls. They were beautiful, dangerous, entirely him. I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed, he said. I'm fine. Her voice came out breathless. Alessandro's eyes darkened as he took in the sight of her in his shirt. You should be sleeping. I can't. Why not? Daniela wrapped her arms around herself. Because I keep thinking about you. About this. About how fast everything is moving and how terrified I am, but also how I haven't felt this alive in years. Alessandro crossed the room slowly. Do you want me to leave? No. The word came out instantly. I want you to stay. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch but not touching. Daniela. I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I just don't want to be alone. Alessandro's jaw tightened. You'll never be alone again. He took her hand and led her to the bed. They lay down together, Alessandro on his back, Daniela curled against his side. His arm wrapped around her, holding her close. It was intimate without being sexual. Safe without being suffocating. Daniela pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Tell me something real. What do you want to know? Why me? Really? Alessandro was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair. Because when I saw you in that cafe letting that bastard tear you down, I saw something that broke my heart. Not weakness. Strength. The kind of strength that comes from surviving things that should have destroyed you. He shifted, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. And then you looked at me, he continued, and I saw past the fear to something else. Something soft and genuine and real. In my world nothing is real, Daniela. Everything is performance or manipulation or power plays. But you're real. You're honest. You're everything I didn't know I was missing. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm broken. No. His voice was fierce. You're scarred. There's a difference. Scars mean you survived. Scars mean you're strong enough to keep going even when everything tried to break you. Daniela's hand fisted in his shirt. What if I can't be what you need? You already are. What if I disappoint you? Impossible. What if? He kissed her, swallowing her doubts. It was slow and deep and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were intense. Stop trying to find reasons this won't work. Start believing it will. How? Trust me. Trust this. He pressed her hand against his chest, over his heart. Trust what you feel right here. Daniela closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. I'm trying, she whispered. That's all I ask. They lay together in the darkness, wrapped around each other, as the city lights cast patterns on the ceiling. And for the first time in months, Daniela felt safe. 3 weeks later, Alessandro kept his word. He didn't push, didn't demand, didn't rush her into anything she wasn't ready for. But he was always there, steady, consistent, devoted. He brought her coffee every morning, drove her to work and picked her up, took her to dinner at restaurants she'd only dreamed of visiting, showed her parts of the city she'd never seen. He introduced her to his world slowly, carefully. Never the dark parts, never the violence or the danger. Just the beauty. The art galleries he supported. The charities he funded. The legitimate businesses he'd built alongside the less legitimate ones. Daniela found herself falling deeper with each passing day. She moved some of her things into his penthouse. Started keeping a toothbrush in his bathroom. Left books on his nightstand. Small steps. Small claims. But each one felt monumental. 4 weeks later, they were having dinner at a restaurant when it happened. Alessandro had been called away by a phone call. Business, he'd said apologetically. Daniela sat alone, sipping wine and watching the other diners. "Excuse me." She looked up to find a man standing beside her table. He was attractive, well-dressed, with an easy confidence. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I couldn't help noticing you're alone. Would you like some company?" "I'm actually waiting for someone," Daniela said politely. "Then I'll keep you entertained until they arrive." He slid into Alessandro's seat without waiting for permission. "I'm Marco. And you are far too beautiful to be sitting alone." "I'm Daniela. And I'm really fine. Let me buy you another glass of wine. Or champagne. You look like a woman who deserves champagne." Daniela's discomfort grew. "That's very kind, but... Come on." Marco leaned closer, his smile widening. "One drink. What's the harm?" "The harm," a cold voice said from behind him, "is that you're in my seat." Daniela's heart jumped. Alessandro stood there, his expression calm but his eyes absolutely lethal. Marco turned, his smile faltering. "I was just... leaving." It wasn't a suggestion. Marco stood quickly, nearly knocking over his chair. "I didn't realize." Alessandro didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared at the man with eyes that promised violence. Marco fled. Alessandro slid into his seat, his jaw tight. "Did he touch you?" "No. He was just... making you uncomfortable." "Yes," Daniela admitted. Alessandro's hands clenched on the table. She could see him fighting for control, see the violence he wanted to unleash battling against his restraint. She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "I'm fine. You handled it." "I wanted to break his fucking neck." The rawness in his voice surprised her. This was the first time she'd seen his control truly slip. "But you didn't," she said softly. "You protected me without becoming the monster you're afraid of being." Alessandro's eyes met hers, dark and intense. "Do you know what it does to me? Watching men look at you like you're something they can have." "Alessandro. You're mine, Daniela." His voice was rough, possessive. "Mine to protect. Mine to care for. Mine to love." The word hung between them. Love. He'd never said it before. Never put a name to what they both felt. Daniela's breath caught. "Alessandro. I know it's too soon," he said. "I know I should wait. Should let you catch up. But I can't pretend anymore. I love you. I've loved you since that first moment in the cafe. And watching other men try to touch what's mine." He cut himself off, his jaw working. Daniela stood, moving around the table. She cupped his face, making him look at her. "Take me home," she said quietly. Alessandro's eyes flared. "Daniela. Take me home, Alessandro. Now." That night, they barely made it through the door. Alessandro pressed her against the wall, his mouth claiming hers with desperate hunger. Daniela responded just as desperately, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. "Tell me to stop," Alessandro growled against her throat. Tell me if this is too much. Don't stop. Her voice was breathless. Don't you dare stop. He lifted her and she wrapped her legs around his waist. He carried her through the penthouse to his bedroom, not the guest room she'd been using but his room, his bed. He laid her down gently despite the fire between them, his eyes searching hers. Are you sure? Yes. She pulled him down. I'm sure. What followed was intense and consuming and perfect. Alessandro touched her like she was precious, like she was everything. He worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, learning every sound she made, every place that made her gasp. And when they finally came together it felt like coming home. After they lay tangled in his sheets, both breathing hard, Alessandro's hand traced patterns on her bare shoulder. I love you, he said again, his voice raw. I need you to know that. Daniela turned in his arms, pressing her palm against his chest. I love you too. The confession felt like jumping off a cliff. Felt like flying. Alessandro's eyes closed and she saw something that looked like relief wash over his face. Say it again. I love you. He kissed her, soft, reverent, full of promise. I'm never letting you go, he whispered against her lips. Good, she whispered back. 2 months later. Life with Alessandro was everything Daniela had never known she wanted. He was attentive without being suffocating. Protective without being controlling. He encouraged her dreams, even set up a small studio where she could paint again. You have talent, he'd said when she showed him her work. The world deserves to see it. She'd cried. Actually cried. Because no one had ever believed in her like this. But not everything was perfect. There were moments when Alessandro's phone would ring and his expression would go cold. Moments when men in dark suits would arrive and he'd disappear into his study. Moments when she'd catch glimpses of the violence that lurked beneath his controlled exterior. She tried not to think about it. Tried to focus on the man he was with her. Gentle, devoted, loving. But she couldn't ignore it forever. 10 weeks later. Daniela was painting in her studio when Alessandro appeared in the doorway. Something was wrong. She could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the darkness in his eyes. What happened? She asked, setting down her brush. Alessandro crossed the room, pulling her into his arms. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. Alessandro, you're scaring me. There's been a threat, he said finally, his voice rough. Against me. Against my operations. What kind of threat? The kind that puts you in danger. Daniela's blood ran cold. What does that mean? Alessandro pulled back, cupping her face. It means I need to handle this. It means I need to make sure you're protected. I'm fine here. No. His voice was firm. They know about you, Daniela. They know you matter to me. Which makes you a target. Fear clawed at her chest. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. The emptiness in his eyes terrified her. Alessandro. I won't let anyone hurt you. His grip tightened. Even if it means burning everything down. Even if it means... He cut himself off, but she understood. Even if it meant becoming the monster. There has to be another way, Daniela said desperately. There isn't. Then walk away. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Walk away from all of it. We can leave. Start over somewhere else. Just us. Alessandro's expression softened. You'd give up everything for that? I'd give up everything for you. He kissed her hard and desperate. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. No. He pressed his forehead to hers. But I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway. 3 days later. Alessandro was gone. He'd left in the middle of the night, pressing a kiss to her forehead and whispering that he'd be back soon. That was 3 days ago. Daniela tried to stay calm. Tried to trust that he knew what he was doing. But fear gnawed at her constantly. What if something happened to him? What if he didn't come back? If... The door burst open. Daniela jumped, her heart racing. Alessandro stood in the doorway, his suit torn, blood on his collar. But he was alive. He was whole. Alessandro. She ran to him, throwing her arms around him. He caught her, holding her tightly. I'm okay. I'm okay. What happened? Whose blood? Not mine. His voice was rough. It's over, Daniela. The threat is gone. You're safe. She pulled back, searching his face. What did you do? What I had to. The emptiness in his eyes told her everything. Daniela's hands shook. How many? Does it matter? Yes. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Enough. I did enough to make sure no one will ever threaten you again. Daniela should be horrified. Should be disgusted. Should be running away from this man who just admitted to killing for her. Instead, she pulled him close, holding him as he trembled. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry you have to see this side of me. I see all of you, she said softly. The good and the bad. The gentle and the violent. And I love all of it. Alessandro pulled back, his eyes searching hers. How can you? Because I know why you do it. Because I know it's not who you are, it's what you do to protect what matters. You matter, he said fiercely. You matter more than anything. Then stop apologizing for keeping me safe. He kissed her desperately, his hands tangling in her hair. I need you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. They stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding clothes, seeking connection. What followed was raw and intense. Less about pleasure and more about confirmation. That they were both alive. Both here. Both together. After, as they lay tangled together, Alessandro spoke quietly. I need to tell you something. Daniela's heart clenched. What? The threat, it wasn't random. It was retaliation. He took a breath. For leaving. Leaving. I've been pulling out of the family business. Slowly. Carefully. But some people see it as betrayal. Daniela sat up, pulling the sheet around her. You're leaving the Mafia? Yes. Why? Alessandro met her eyes, his expression raw. Because I want a life with you. A real life. Not one where I'm constantly looking over my shoulder or putting you in danger. Not one where I have to become a monster to protect what I love. Tears filled her eyes. Alessandro. I have legitimate businesses. Enough money to last several lifetimes. I don't need the rest. He cupped her face. But I need you. And I can't have both. What if they won't let you go? They don't have a choice. His voice was hard. I made it very clear what happens to anyone who tries to stop me. Daniela's breath caught. You could have died. But I didn't. And now it's done. We're free, Daniela. Truly free. She threw her arms around him, sobbing. Don't ever scare me like that again. I promise. He held her tightly. I promise. 3 months later. Alessandro proposed on a Tuesday. They were on his balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. No fanfare. No grand gesture. Just him dropping to one knee, holding a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Marry me, he said simply. Build a life with me. Let me spend every day proving I'm worthy of you. Daniela's tears fell freely. Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and pulled her into his arms. I love you, he whispered. More than I knew it was possible to love another person. I love you too. They kissed as the sun set, sealing their promise. 6 months later. The wedding was small, just close friends and the family Alessandro still spoke to. Daniela wore a simple white dress that made Alessandro's eyes darken with desire. When they said their vows, his voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to spend every day making sure you know how precious you are to me. Daniela's voice shook as she responded. I promise to love all of you, to stand beside you, to build a life that's worthy of what we've survived. They sealed their promises with a kiss that made several guests clear their throats. At the reception, Alessandro pulled her onto the dance floor. Happy, Mrs. De Luca? He murmured against her ear. Deliriously. Good. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Because I have something to tell you. What? I spoke to my lawyer today. All the paperwork is finalized. I'm completely out of the family business. All of it. Daniela pulled back, searching his face. Really? Really? We're starting fresh. Clean slate. Tears filled her eyes. What are you going to do? I have ideas. Legitimate investments. Real estate. Maybe I'll help you open a gallery for your art. Alessandro. We have our whole lives ahead of us, Daniela. And I intend to spend every moment making sure you're happy. She kissed him, not caring about their audience. I'm already happy. As long as I have you. 1 year later. Daniela stood in the nursery, one hand on her swollen belly, the other holding a paintbrush. She was adding the finishing touches to a mural on the wall. A garden full of flowers and butterflies, bright and hopeful. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, Alessandro's hands covering hers on her belly. You should be resting, he murmured. I wanted to finish this before she arrives. Intuition. Alessandro pressed a kiss to her neck. I don't care if it's a boy or girl. As long as you're both healthy. Daniela leaned back against him. I can't believe this is real sometimes. That we're here. That we made it. We made it because we chose each other. Every day. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. She turned in his arms, studying his face. The past year had softened him. The danger in his eyes had been replaced with peace. The tension in his shoulders had eased. He was still intimidating, still powerful, but now it came from confidence rather than violence. I love you, she said. I love you more. Impossible. Alessandro smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still made her heart skip. Want to bet? What are the stakes? If I win, you let me spoil our daughter absolutely rotten. Daniela laughed. And if I win? The same. He pulled her closer, careful of her belly. Because let's be honest, we're both going to spoil her. Probably. They stood together in the nursery, surrounded by the life they'd built. A life free from violence and fear. A life full of love and possibility. Thank you, Alessandro said softly. For what? For seeing past the monster. For believing I could be more. For giving me a reason to be better. Daniela cupped his face. You were never a monster. You were just a man who'd never been loved right. And now you're a man who's loved completely. Alessandro kissed her, soft and reverent. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, they didn't notice. Because they'd found their light in each other. And that was all they needed. 2 months later. Daniela woke to contractions at 3 in the morning. By dawn, Alessandro was pacing the hospital waiting room, his usual control shattered by fear. And by noon he was holding his daughter. She was tiny and perfect, with dark hair and her mother's eyes. Alessandro stared at her, this impossibly small person, and felt something break open in his chest. She's beautiful, he whispered. Daniela, exhausted but glowing, smiled. She has your stubborn chin. Poor girl. Lucky girl. She has a father who'll move heaven and earth for her. Alessandro looked at his wife, his daughter, his entire world contained in this hospital room. I'll protect you both, he said. Always. No matter what. I know. Daniela reached for his hand. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. We're a team now. A family. A family. Alessandro pressed a kiss to his daughter's forehead, then to his wife's lips. He'd survived violence, betrayal, and darkness. He'd walked away from power and legacy. He'd risked everything for love. And as he sat there holding the two people who mattered most, Alessandro knew with absolute certainty. It was worth it. Every sacrifice. Every choice. Every moment of fear. It was all worth it. Because love, real, honest, consuming love, was worth burning the world down for. And he'd do it again. 1,000 times over. 5 years later. Alessandro sat in the garden behind their home, watching his daughter chase butterflies. She was 5 now, bright, fearless, with her mother's kindness and his determination. Daniela appeared beside him, another child, their son, balanced on her hip. She sat down, leaning against Alessandro's shoulder. "Happy?" she asked. Alessandro looked at his family, at the life they'd built, at the peace they'd found. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good." He kissed his cheek. "Because I have news." "What kind of news?" She took his hand, pressing it against her still flat stomach. Alessandro's eyes widened. Again. Again. He laughed, a sound of pure joy, and pulled her close, careful of their son. "How did I get this lucky?" he murmured. "We got lucky," Daniela corrected. "Both of us." Their daughter ran up, demanding Alessandro chase her. He scooped her up, making her squeal with laughter. Daniela watched them, her heart full. They'd survived so much, overcome so much, built something beautiful from the ashes of their broken pasts. And as the sun set on another perfect day, Daniela knew. This was forever. This was home. This was love. The end. Thank you so much for staying with Daniela and Alessandro through their journey from broken pasts to a beautiful forever. If this story or emotional romance stories